Hey everyone, today we're ranking the survivors of Evil Dead the game from worst to best. Let's get into it. Starting out we have Ed Getley. Ed Getley isn't actually that bad, despite the fact that I do think he's the worst. He most definitely has utility and a role to play. Ed's main ability is a special torch type that can detect the demon's traps and even disarm them. His additional abilities consist of an extended flashlight battery, crossbow weapon mastery, and a greater chance at finding better loot from drops and chests. My main issue with Ed is that his ability feels solely focused on the game's setup, or early game, which is typically the part of the game where you need your abilities less. The best characters are capable of using their abilities the entire game, or more prominently at the end when things are getting a bit more intense. Ed is not useless though. He makes looting a lot safer and more rewarding, and crossbow weapon mastery is good for outputting large amounts of damage. Next up we have Scotty. Scotty's primary ability allows him to output an explosive attack that damages enemies in your radius. His additional abilities are okay. First off, his heavy attacks will also apply damage to nearby enemies, your fear decreases with each kill, and finally, you have Lumberjack Axe Mastery, which is the two-handed axe. All in all, a huge benefit of Scotty is that his entire set of abilities really do synergize well, and the Axe Mastery feels like a solid weapon choice to receive the additional buff for. My main issue with Scotty is his lackluster primary ability. I've never found his explosive shockwave particularly useful, and also find it can be interrupted fairly easily too. The best part about Scotty is probably the Axe Mastery, in addition to the AoE damage with heavy attacks. That's a really solid pairing for a warrior character. Next up we have our first Ash, which is Ash from the Evil Dead. Ash is able to reduce the fear levels of himself and teammates for those close by a decent amount. His additional abilities being a partial health restore on successful heavy attacks for you and your teammates. Landing a headshot with a ranged weapon will make the follow-up shot from a teammate deal extra damage and further give them health. I do like the idea of healing through combat as it were, but I'm not entirely convinced on its effectiveness, particularly after its recent nerfs. His fear reduction also isn't that substantial, and I feel with a good leader character and some careful fear management, there isn't really that much of a need for this ability, with it making very little difference I feel. Still an interesting support character nonetheless. Knowby is one of 3 leader characters. The main downside to her ability I think is that it relies on ranged weapons. With this ability active, all ranged weapon damage in your radius doubles. This does also include your range damage. The other abilities include an additional 10% passive damage with ranged weapons to yourself and those nearby, all of the time, and then your attacks deal bonus balance bar damage to that of basic, elite, and boss units. I think to make this work well, you pretty much need to have a hunter on the team, and the ability to destroy a balance bar is great, particularly when facing down bosses like Evil Ash, but I think the ability's short duration and its reliance on ranged weapons does make it weaker. Situationally good I find. Pablo Bolivar's primary ability allows him to create an amulet every 2 minutes. His additional abilities being hidden from demon vision, starting with an amulet, and passive shield bar recovery for at least 1 shield bar. He's a very shield focused character. He's also the most unique support character, with his support extending to hiding from the demon and not just to do with healing. It's cool being able to hide, and I believe even hide your teammates if you happen to be the driver of a car. It's great being able to make tons of amulets for your team, although the cooldown for each amulet creation is quite a long time. Overall, I think his ability to just straight up create amulets, and the unique ability to hide from demon vision, does make him a bit of a wild card that can throw the demon off while still being helpful. Ash vs Evil Dead is a pretty well-rounded, and I think underrated character. Your primary ability causes an explosion, damaging the balance bars of enemies in your area on a short cooldown. You also have an aura effect that increases damage and fear resistance. Additional abilities include starting with the chainsaw and El Jefe Grande, doubling your aura effects when a finisher is performed, which I believe gives a 20% boost to damage and a 40% increase to fear resistance. Overall a pretty solid character, and one of the better leader choices for just flat buffs. Knocking out balance bars is super useful, and acting essentially as a constant buff in the background is just genuinely all-round helpful. Starting with a chainsaw is nice, but I would argue is one of his more lackluster abilities or features. Ash from Evil Dead 2 is quite underrated at the moment. His primary ability allows him to instantly push the demon out of possessed basic units or survivors. If done on elite or boss units, it will partially drain the demon's energy. Additional abilities include seeing crates through walls, starting the match with a double barrel shotgun, and finally weapon mastery for the double barrel. Overall, a solid kit. Being a hunter and starting out with the weapon you also have mastery for is really nice, particularly as the double barrel outputs quite high damage. The ability to see crates through walls is nice, but a lot of the time you can hear where they are, and so it's not that big a deal, I find. The main downside to his primary ability is the fact that late game the demon will mainly possess elite or boss units, making your ability fairly worthless, as again, near the end game they will have fast energy regen, and will likely have a full bar, giving it minimal effect. Great for instant survivor saves though, and for pesky basic units that have been buffed up. Amanda Fisher has the primary ability of a brief duration of unlimited ammo. Additional abilities include starting the match with a pistol, pistol weapon mastery, and an additional 2% of damage per precision hit, that I believe stacks up. There's a good synergy between these, but they are also extremely focused on a singular aspect of gameplay, relying solely on the pistol and consistent range weapon damage. Amanda has a set of abilities that can be incredibly effective, or completely useless I find. You have to really time your ability well, and make the most of the unlimited ammo for its duration. When used well, it can shred elite units and bosses, particularly if you're highly accurate with your pistol. Pistols I find are also very strong as range weapons go, outputting solid damage for stronger units, and an efficient tool for clearing out basic units. Kelly has the ability to dodge without using stamina for a short duration, whilst also causing bleed damage from ranged weapons. She has mastery with the meat hammer, bleed damage infliction upon a successful dodge, and increased damage per second the longer you remain in combat. Kelly has a large focus on buffing herself. However, the buffs she does give herself are very strong. Pairing up a ranged weapon with a meat hammer is also a very good combo. It's a nice fast weapon that pairs in well with the hunter class, and their ability to dodge a ton. It also means you can get the most out of the inflicted bleed damage, dodging and quickly landing some blows. Her main ability is also a complete lifesaver, being able to just completely dip out of a situation even if you're overrun. Henry the Red is an incredibly strong character, with his primary ability allowing for a short duration of invincibility essentially. For 7 seconds you cannot take any damage to your health or shield. Additional abilities include starting the match with an extra shield bar, the rebound ability, which will reflect 30% of damage taken back onto your attacker. Finally, a 10% increase to health and shield bar length. He's essentially the tank character, and one that can be genuinely hard to kill as the demon. As a warrior, you can get your melee damage very high. Comboed with the fact that you can briefly become invisible, makes you capable of outputting a ton of damage whilst taking none. Even when you do take damage, you still have additional abilities reflecting damage. Pretty great, and especially good for facing down bosses or tanky possessed units. Lord Arthur is a leader character with a focus on melee weaponry. His primary ability activates a melee weapon buff for yourself and those in the area, whilst further reducing fear levels. With this buff active, you gain extra damage when using a sword too. His secondary abilities include weapon mastery for heavy and light attacks, giving a 30% buff to each, this also applying to those around you. Finally, you can gain a 3-second extra duration to your primary ability for each finisher performed. Oh yeah, and you also start the match with a sword, which ties things in nicely. I believe Arthur to be the best leader character, providing strong buffs all round, applicable to every character, but mainly benefiting warriors and your own attacks. Cheryl Williams is considered by many as the best currently, and I can't really argue against that to be honest, with her being an incredibly reliable healer for the entire team. When playing Demon, Cheryl is someone you want out the game early. She has already received nerfs too, but regardless of that, she is still one of the stronger characters in my opinion. Her main ability allows her to place down a healing zone, affecting all survivors in the area and healing them by a solid amount. When drinking Shemp's colas, the effect will also apply to survivors in the area, healing them too at a greater than usual rate, and further applying fear reduction. She's also capable of carrying more Shemp's colas, allowing even more healing. Cheryl, despite her nerf, is still insanely good, and great at healing a team. I would say she also benefits from being one of the simpler supports to play. You can buff your team simply by playing normally, and using your ability at the right moments. Ash from Army of Darkness is the Warrior Ash. Your main ability is the Wise Man's Potion, Once drunk, you gain a 30% damage increase, a 50% damage reduction, health restoration, and fear reduction. Secondary abilities include an explosion that triggers when a shield bar is destroyed, shield bar recovery upon performing a finisher, and finally, Chainsaw Mastery. This version of Ash has quite the kit, and one with quite a lot of synergy too. The Wiseman's Potion is debatably the best ability in the game, allowing you to heal, reduce fear, whilst buffing damage, and reducing damage received. It's literally like the perfect combination of things. Being the warrior class and having Chainsaw Mastery makes your attacks incredibly strong too. You can be self-sufficient, but also greatly help your team. Not much to say, Army of Darkness Ash is really strong. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. Be sure to drop your own rankings down below. Thanks, and goodbye.